I'm Sarah, and this is my story. It had been dark for hours, but I was still completely focused on my work at the office. I was so engrossed in sketching, making corrections, and immersing myself in the project that I didn't immediately notice when my boss, Aaron, came in. He stopped at the door with a reproachful expression and reminded me to take care of my health. Aaron pointed out how late it was and asked if I was going to pick up my son from karate class. He appreciated my dedication but warned me not to overwork myself. I was startled and exclaimed that it was nearly 7 p.m. and I needed to pick up Isaac from karate class. Quickly gathering my things, I explained that I wanted to discuss the new design for a children's book cover, combining traditional styles with the latest trends. I rushed out towards the bus stop, leaving Aaron admiring my sketches and creativity. As I hurried to the karate academy, my mind was racing with thoughts of how I managed to balance so many responsibilities: a sick husband, a child, household chores, and a demanding job. I found Isaac anxious in the locker room, relieved to see me finally arrive. He had been alone for an hour, thinking I had forgotten about him. I hugged him, apologizing and asking about his day and homework. Isaac calmed down and proudly told me he had finished his homework while waiting. I praised him, feeling so fortunate to have such a responsible and excellent student for a son. I could see Isaac missed his father, my first husband, who had passed away, leaving a huge void in both our lives. When we got home, we found Ron, my current husband, lying on the couch, irritably changing TV channels. He complained about being hungry since lunch and feeling neglected, calling himself an unhappy handicapped man. I asked him worriedly if his leg was hurting and promised to prepare dinner quickly and then make him a compress. Ron calmed down, waiting for the meal, while Isaac, irritated by the situation, went to the kitchen to help me peel potatoes and chop tomatoes. I praised my son, grateful for his presence. Since Ron fell ill, my life had become a real challenge. I divided my time between caring for Isaac, my demanding job, and my sick husband. There was no time left for myself or to rest, living in a constant state of exhaustion. At work, I was highly respected and valued by my colleagues, always dedicating myself wholeheartedly with passion and enthusiasm. But my story begins long before that. I was the youngest in my family. My parents passed away when they were quite old, first my mother and then my father. I felt lonely in my spacious 3-bedroom apartment in Chicago, wishing I could share moments with my mother, hear her words of encouragement, receive advice, and feel my father's affectionate gaze. Unfortunately, my parents were no longer with me. During this difficult period of my life, I met Lucas, my first husband. Lucas was in the military, spending most of his time in combat zones and returning home only for leave and vacations. We fell in love quickly after we started dating and got married. I was a dedicated and faithful wife, waiting for him during his long missions. When little Isaac was born, Lucas promised to quit his dangerous job after our son's christening. However, that promise never materialized. He didn't return home, and I found myself a widow at 25. The period of mourning was long and painful, but I found strength in my son and my work. Years later, my life took a new turn when I met Ron. He was the opposite of Lucas, confident, charming, courting me with poetry and flowers. Without realizing it, I fell in love. Ron was good to Isaac, and we decided to get married, encouraged by his insistence. Ron worked on construction projects and frequently traveled for work, providing financial stability to our home. However, my colleagues at the workshop were skeptical about Ron and often advised me with concern. Rose, my longtime colleague, expressed her doubts about Ron's frequent travels and high local salaries. She suggested he might have a mistress or even another family. I always felt uncomfortable with conversations about Ron and defended my husband, explaining that he had his reasons for not talking about his childhood. I insisted it wasn't my business, that he worked and brought money home, which was what mattered. I tried to reassure everyone, mentioning the baby on the way and Isaac's excitement about having a sibling. But tragedy struck while Ron was working at a construction site in a nearby town. He fell from scaffolding on the 3rd floor, severely injuring his leg and ankle. He returned home with a splint, but even after a long time, he couldn't walk properly. This accident was a huge blow for such an active man. He felt helpless and disconnected from everything and everyone. I sympathized and supported him as much as I could, taking on all the responsibilities of the house, Isaac's care, and the family's income. Now, with Ron just lying at home and not working, I felt especially overburdened with the arrival of the new baby. But I was determined to be strong for my children. What worried me most was Ron's behavior. He seemed uninterested in everything, even Isaac's school progress. I thought he could at least read to his stepson or help with homework, as his leg didn't prevent that. But Ron acted like a child, always wanting attention and affection, rarely leaving the couch. I felt torn between my love for Ron and my growing frustration with his behavior. I tried to encourage Ron. I asked him why he was so down and suggested he try going to the balcony for some fresh air. I offered to help him walk a little, thinking it might help him recover faster. I expressed my concern, wondering if he was interested in how my day went, how Isaac was doing, or how I was feeling. Ron responded that I couldn't understand his suffering. He complained about constant leg pain and ineffective painkillers, calling himself a useless invalid. In an accusatory tone, he added that I was selfish, only thinking of myself. He pointed out that pregnancy wasn't an illness and questioned what was wrong with that. Ron lamented being alone all day while I was gone, feeling that I still blamed him when I returned. A few days later, Ron found a woman online named Kelly, a healer who promised quick and effective cures for muscle and bone ailments. I tried to explain that it was likely a scam, but Ron was convinced the treatment would work. Kelly began visiting our home regularly, and Ron claimed his pain was decreasing. One ordinary day, I returned home earlier than usual because Isaac was sick and didn't go to school. Upon arriving, I noticed unfamiliar women's shoes in the hallway and realized Kelly was in the house. The kitchen door was firmly closed. I intended to greet the visitor and my husband, but for some reason decided to approach quietly and listen to Ron and Kelly's conversation. I was curious about what they were doing, what they were talking about, and how the treatment was progressing, but there was something more. More intriguingly, why was the door closed? I overheard Ron complaining to Kelly, calling her his love and expressing fatigue from pretending to be weak. He spoke of imagining how this wonderful house would finally be theirs, freeing them. Kelly, the so-called healer, tried to calm Ron, worried about the attention they might attract. She questioned his haste and complicated plans, especially with my pregnancy. Kelly mentioned the need to care for the expected child to avoid suspicion as a widower. She spoke of patience and past close calls, then revealed a chilling plan involving poison in tea. As I listened, I felt a chill run through my body. My colleagues were right. What kind of person had I trusted? The horrifying conversation I just heard was unbelievable. My first instinct was to burst in and confront them, to throw out my husband and his lover. But I quickly restrained myself, realizing I needed proof of their criminal intent. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and realizations about Ron's true motives. After many desperate thoughts, I quietly returned down the hallway, closed the door loudly, and announced my arrival. Kelly emerged from the kitchen, claiming to have just finished a session and praising Ron's recovery. I managed to maintain my composure, thanking her and promising payment for the sessions. After Kelly left, I had a perfunctory conversation with Ron, cared for him, and checked on Isaac. I made excuses about being exhausted and having a headache, still in shock from Ron's lies and deceit. The next day at work, I was distracted, crying hidden in the bathroom and unable to concentrate. I desperately wondered how to escape this situation and expose these criminals. My distress caught the attention of Aaron, my boss, who had been observing me with concern. He approached me during a quiet moment and gently inquired about what was happening. Aaron noted that he could tell I'd been crying and expressed how difficult it was for him to see me like this. Surprised by Aaron's concern, I ended up telling him everything. We had a long-standing relationship of trust. After unburdening myself, I felt a little relieved and confided in Aaron about my fears. I told him I felt like I was living with a traitor and a murderer, and asked for advice on how to punish Ron and protect Isaac and myself. Aaron responded seriously, suggesting we involve the police. He offered to call a detective he knew and advised me to tell them everything. Aaron assured me that this detective was trustworthy and would help me. He then shared an idea to secretly loosen the screws on Ron's wheelchair and record him with a hidden phone. Aaron explained that if Ron stood up when the wheelchair broke, it would provide the evidence we needed. He reassured me that he was ready to act with the police and that I wasn't alone. I felt an enormous sense of relief, drawing strength from the reassurance Aaron provided. After speaking with the detective, my fear subsided a little. The detective promised to investigate Ron and the fake healer, advising me to be careful, not put myself in danger, and only eat and drink what I prepared myself. However, I was still irritated. Every time I saw Ron, my anger and resentment grew. That night, I carefully loosened the screws on the wheelchair, prepared the phone recording, and waited. When Ron leaned on the chair, the wheels came off and he fell, but quickly stood up. Isaac, hearing the noise, ran into the room and exclaimed in surprise at Ron's apparent recovery. I started clapping sarcastically, pointing out how effective the healer's sessions seemed to be. I confronted Ron about his lies and pretense of illness. Realizing he'd been exposed, Ron tried to feign pain and limp. I angrily scolded him, telling him to stop the ridiculous act as the truth was now clear. As Ron was trying to come up with an excuse, the doorbell rang. Isaac opened the door, and Aaron entered with a police officer. I had informed Aaron of the plan, and he had been waiting for the right moment. They apprehended Ron, and the officer quickly restrained him, announcing his arrest for attempted murder. Ron desperately protested, claiming innocence and declaring his love for me. The detective, unmoved, signaled Ron to be quiet, revealing that I had sent a video of his miraculous recovery and that his accomplice had already betrayed him. Still in shock, I watched as Ron was taken away by the detective, unable to say goodbye, and still trying to process everything. Isaac approached Aaron, thanking him for helping me and expressing his dislike for Ron. Aaron seriously assured Isaac that Ron wouldn't return and offered to stay around if Isaac allowed it, explaining that I needed support now. Isaac enthusiastically agreed, comparing Aaron to a movie hero for exposing Ron's true nature. My life took an unexpected turn that day. Aaron suggested Isaac watch some cartoons, explaining he needed to talk to me about grown-up stuff. Isaac understood and went to his room, leaving us alone. Aaron embraced me, trying to calm my frayed nerves. He reassured me that everything was over and that Ron and his accomplice would be in prison for a long time. In a daze, I muttered about my bad luck with men, my first husband dying, the second turning out to be a criminal, and now being pregnant with his child. I questioned if the problem was with me, feeling utterly lost and defeated. Aaron calmly pointed out that I hadn't noticed someone who had been by my side all these years. He confessed his unconditional love for me, promising he'd never betray me. Aaron urged me to look around and see what I already had, though he assured me he wasn't trying to pressure me. Finally allowing myself to trust, I hugged Aaron, thanking him for being there. I admitted I didn't know if I could reciprocate his feelings, but was willing to get to know him better. Aaron reassured me, expressing his deep respect and desire to be my friend first and foremost. He promised to stay by my side if that's what I wanted. I told him I didn't want him to leave, but I needed time to process everything. From that point on, my life began to improve slowly. Despite a difficult pregnancy and dark thoughts, Aaron was always there for me. Our relationship strengthened, and I eventually fell in love with him. I divorced Ron and married Aaron, realizing he was the loving and trustworthy man I had always dreamed of. As time passed, Aaron proved to be genuinely reliable and loving towards both Isaac and me. Our boutique thrived, and Aaron had to travel to other cities for business negotiations. One night, a month before my due date, my water broke unexpectedly. In a panic, I called an ambulance and barely managed to ask a neighbor to look after Isaac before losing consciousness. The birth was a nightmare, and I drifted in and out of consciousness during the difficult delivery. Among the medical staff, I didn't recognize one masked nurse. It was Lucy, Ron's accomplice, seeking revenge. When I woke up, I immediately sensed the absence of my baby. The doctor approached with a deeply sad expression and broke the devastating news that my child hadn't survived. I covered my face with my hands and cried desperately, my world crumbling around me. Aaron tried to comfort me, reminding me that Isaac still needed me and promising to be by my side through it all. We buried the baby, and I shed many tears over the tiny grave, struggling to accept the loss. If it weren't for Isaac's incredible strength and maturity, I don't think I could have endured the pain. 7 years after losing my baby, the memory still weighed heavily on my heart. But life had moved on, and our boutique, Estrella, had become one of the most famous and popular shops in New York City. We were attracting customers from all over the country. Aaron and I worked in perfect harmony, understanding each other with just a few words. Aaron and Isaac, now a 13-year-old teenager, had developed a close father-son relationship. Isaac was passionate about soccer and an exemplary student. One day, I had to take the subway for an urgent business meeting because our car was in the shop. On the way, I encountered a boy about 7 years old using crutches. He looked abandoned and dirty, and my heart clenched at the sight. I bought some pastries and a warm drink, approaching the boy to offer them. He was so hungry he almost choked while eating. Cautiously, I asked him his name and why he was begging. After finishing his food, the boy, with a mix of shyness and trust, told me his name was Gabriel and explained how he had injured his leg. Worried, I asked if his parents hadn't taken him to a doctor, thinking there might be treatment options given his young age. Gabriel sighed deeply and shared his heartbreaking story about his alcoholic mother and absent father. I felt a wave of sadness and compassion wash over me. I hugged the boy, trying to comfort him, and promised to help. Gabriel looked at me with a mix of hope and disbelief, doubting that anything could change. I felt an inexplicable, strong urge to help this child and promised to do everything possible to change his situation. Moved by his words and desire for a better life, I tried to reassure Gabriel, telling him not to lose hope. I quickly called Aaron, my voice choked with emotion as I explained the situation. Aaron arrived promptly, listened carefully to Gabriel's story, and agreed to help. We decided to visit Gabriel's home to speak with his mother and better understand the situation. Gabriel nervously guided us to his apartment. As we prepared to leave, I noticed his worn and dirty clothes and told him we'd buy new ones on the way. When we arrived at the apartment, we were greeted by a strong smell of alcohol and cigarettes. The house was in terrible condition, and Gabriel's mother was snoring loudly in a chair. I'll never forget the sadness in Gabriel's eyes as he explained his mother's situation. He told us she hadn't woken up since the previous night, having been drinking with some men in the kitchen. My heart ached as Gabriel described how his mother would yell at him when she woke up, demanding money for more alcohol and cigarettes. The pain in his voice was palpable as he asked why his mother couldn't love him like other mothers did. Aaron and I exchanged troubled looks, then made a decision. We told Gabriel we'd take him home with us and see a doctor about his leg the next day. We left a note for his mother, explaining our decision. Gabriel's gratitude overwhelmed me as he hugged me tightly, calling me a fairy godmother. His words about magic existing in the real world brought a sad smile to my face as I gently stroked his curly hair. On our way home, we bought Gabriel new clothes and a backpack with essentials. His excitement about starting a new life with us was infectious, despite the gravity of the situation. At home, I couldn't think of anything but taking care of this boy. After bathing him and examining his leg, we realized how serious his condition was. His leg was visibly deformed, breaking my heart all over again. After a nutritious meal and dressed in clean clothes, Gabriel fell asleep with a peaceful smile. In the kitchen, Aaron, Isaac, and I gathered to discuss the situation. I was determined to care for Gabriel, but Aaron expressed legal concerns about formal adoption, warning about the complexities of the process. Isaac, excited about the idea of welcoming Gabriel, promised to be a good big brother. Aaron asked if I was prepared for the long and complicated process of legal adoption. I answered with conviction, explaining how seeing Gabriel in the subway had changed something in me. I wanted to give him a happy, normal childhood, feeling he deserved it. The next day, I took Gabriel to a pediatric orthopedist. The doctor examined him, took x-rays and a CT scan, then delivered the news: Gabriel's leg condition was serious, requiring complex surgery and long-term rehabilitation. When asked if we consented to the procedure, Gabriel eagerly exclaimed his readiness to go through it all if it meant he could walk, run, and ride a bike again. His determination brought tears to my eyes as I hugged him, promising we'd take care of everything. The conversation with Gabriel's mother, Anita, was challenging. We found her drunk and had to wake her with cold water. Anita protested angrily, claiming we had no right to make decisions about her son. I tried to gently persuade her, explaining the gravity of Gabriel's condition and our willingness to cover all costs. Anita's irritated response, threatening to call the police if we didn't return Gabriel, pushed Aaron to his limit. He slammed his hand on the table, telling Anita to go ahead and call the police, warning that she'd lose custody if they saw Gabriel's condition. The intensity of the moment was palpable, and I found myself holding my breath, hoping for a resolution that would give Gabriel the chance he deserved. I watched as Aaron placed some alcohol bottles and food on the table, observing Anita's reaction. My heart raced as Anita quickly assessed the situation and signed the papers without hesitation. Then, she began to lament, claiming she loved her son but was just going through a difficult time. I felt a mix of pity and frustration as she explained that she sometimes drank to forget her problems because she couldn't find work. Aaron's thoughts echoed my own: people with alcohol addiction shouldn't have children, it's unfair to make them suffer like this. Once we were back on the street, Aaron and I sighed with relief, both agreeing that we couldn't send Gabriel back to that environment. It wasn't a life for a child, and we marveled at how he had survived there for so long. I immediately began preparing for Gabriel's surgery, ensuring all necessary tests were done. When the doctor requested blood donations from the whole family, I was shocked to discover that Gabriel and I shared the same rare blood type. The doctor's question about our possible relation caught me off guard. I explained how we found Gabriel, emphasizing that we were just trying to help and didn't think we were related. The doctor suggested a DNA test to confirm any relation, which left me feeling both curious and apprehensive. As I shared this information with Aaron, he pointed out the striking similarities between Gabriel and me. I felt a mix of confusion and wonder, agreeing to the DNA test while trying to process this unexpected turn of events. During Gabriel's surgery, I was a bundle of nerves, praying for everything to go well. The relief I felt when the doctor came out with good news was overwhelming. Over the next few weeks, I was amazed at the strong bond Gabriel and I had formed in such a short time. His resilience during his recovery touched my heart, and I found myself constantly encouraging him, feeling immensely proud of his progress. As I lay in bed at night, my mind would wander to the possibility of a distant family connection with Gabriel. I felt like I was trying to piece together a family puzzle I didn't even know existed. When Aaron asked what I was thinking about, I couldn't help but marvel at life's surprises, never having imagined that Gabriel might be a distant relative. As the day of the DNA test results approached, I felt my anxiety growing. I knew that regardless of the outcome, Gabriel's life and mine were already intertwined. The possibility of a blood connection brought a mix of excitement and fear. I told Aaron and Isaac that no matter what the results showed, Gabriel was already part of our family. Their loving nods reassured me that they were ready to accept him, regardless of the test results. One day, Aaron burst into the room with an excited expression, holding some papers. He told me to sit down, explaining that the DNA results had arrived and confirmed what the doctor had suspected. Gabriel was indeed my biological son, with a 99% probability. I was stunned, unable to believe what I was hearing. I wondered aloud about the baby I was told had died at the hospital, realizing my son had been alive all this time. Gabriel, who had overheard everything, asked if I was really his mother and if Anita wasn't his mom. With tears in my eyes, I hugged Gabriel tightly, confirming that he was indeed my son. I apologized for not knowing, promising to investigate what had happened and never to leave him again. In the subsequent trial, I was recognized as Gabriel's biological mother, and Anita lost her parental rights due to neglect. When Anita realized she would lose her benefits, she suddenly remembered Gabriel and begged for his return, claiming love and nostalgia. But Gabriel remembered the abuse and neglect all too well. He was grateful and loved his new parents, Aaron and me, determined to bring joy to our family. After a thorough investigation, detectives unraveled the mystery behind my son's disappearance. Lucy, in an act of cruelty and desperation, had switched my newborn with Anita's deceased baby at the hospital. Learning this, I was horrified and angry, wondering how such a thing could happen and why Lucy wasn't in prison. The detective revealed that life had its own path of justice. Lucy was now fighting a terminal illness in a mental hospital, alone and in pain. Returning home, I found a warm, loving atmosphere. Isaac and Gabriel were playing together, Aaron was cooking, and everyone rushed to greet me. Sitting with my family, I shared my feelings of gratitude for our two wonderful sons, my supportive husband, and our fulfilling work. As we ate dinner, our conversation was full of laughter and plans for the future. Gabriel, now feeling completely part of the family, shared in this happiness. In this home where love reigned, everything seemed in harmony. Together, we had overcome adversity and challenges, and now, leaving the painful past behind, we look towards a future filled with happiness and unity.